Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is, whatever time it is where you are. This is Changes, a Google Plus Hangout on Air, hosted by me. I'm Sally Ember, EDD, an author of science fiction and nonfiction and a blog, and the host of Changes, Conversations Between Authors. And today, April 15th in 2015, tax day for the United States of America, we are so happy to have our guest, a triple citizen. One of her citizenships is the USA, Debbie Manber Kupfer. Hello, Debbie.
Hello, Sally, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, you're welcome. And it's so funny that we're doing it this way, the way I do with people from Greece and France and England, because you're right here in St. Louis with me.
That is true.
And theoretically, I could have just invited you over here and you could be sitting right here. But I like to see people in their home environment. So I'm glad you're home. Tell us about yourself.
Okay. Well, I'm Debbie Manber Kupfer. I was born in England and I grew up in England in the East London suburb of Barking. If anybody likes to listen to music and know of Billy Bragg, I come from the same place as Billy Bragg. And who I met last year. And he's a great guy. So I had to come to St. Louis to meet a fellow person from Barking. But there you go. But anyway, so then after college, after a year of college, I moved to Israel. I lived in Israel for 8 years. A lot of that comes out in my stories and my life there. And I assumed actually I was going to make my life there. But then I met my husband in Jerusalem, whose sister also lives in Israel. And he was out visiting her and doing some classes there. And then we started visiting each other in different places. We met in England, we met in St. Louis, we met back in Israel. And then finally, I moved over here. I moved to North Carolina first, which is where he was working at the time. Then we moved to New York, which is how I started working for P.A.W.S and got into puzzles. And then finally, my husband wanted to move back to St. Louis, which is where he grew up. And when I was 6 months pregnant with my daughter, we moved to St. Louis, and that was 16 years ago. So I've been here now for the last 16 years.
I didn't know your husband grew up here. The question everybody always asks native St. Louisans is, where did he go to high school?
And I think, where did he go? I think he started in, oh God, I'm going to get this wrong, aren't I? He was living in Sioux City. He probably went to Sioux City High School, but then he moved out here to the county. So I think it might have been, partly what is now. I think he went to what is now Parkway Central, but it was just Parkway for most of his high school.
Yes. I think you're right.
Sioux City, I think, is what he did.
Well, it's such a pervasive part of how we identify each other in St. Louis that the actor John Hamm, who happens to be from St. Louis, that is the first question people ask him.
Yes.
What high school did he go to? He ended up going to a private high school, so it doesn't count. But it's just very funny because that is what people use to peg you.
I know.
And I don't know what we're pegging, but there we are. I grew up here. I moved away and didn't live here for 42 years. Lived in a lot of other places. And then I came back here last summer in August. My mom is still here. I have cousins and friends here. And so I'm back. And it's very odd to be back where I grew up. And I'm glad to be here because here you are and lots of other cool people. And what I wanted to bring up today in our Changes conversation is what kind of an author you are, because we have some overlap, but mostly we're very different. And our overlap is in the speculative fiction category. And you've been a participant, you said, in a lot of anthologies. Do you want to talk about that?
Okay. It's almost like the other way around. I did the anthologies later. It's kind of, I mean, my first, okay, let's talk about the first anthology I was part of. The first anthology I was part of is for P.A.W.S. And I can't find a copy of it right now, but others would show you for it.
That's okay. There's a copy of the cover on the event page on Google Plus, and it's on your website.
Okay.
So you got involved in P.A.W.S.
P.A.W.S.
F-A-U-X, for those of you who don't know.
okay, was the brainchild of Misha Burnett, who is another very interesting St. Louis author. I met Misha. He is the author of the Cat Skinner book. See, Cat Skinner's book, and the series, the whole of the, which is a very interesting series, but for people who like speculative fiction. Anyhow, he had this idea for Apocalypse when we had a big prediction of a huge snowstorm in St. Louis. And people said, oh, this is going to be the snow apocalypse. Everything's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of, everybody got ready. Everybody got ready. Everybody thought that this was going to be the worst snowstorm ever. And then nothing happened. So he said, what if this is the same for the end of the world? What if everybody thought that the big comet was going to come down and hit the Earth, and that would be the end of the world, and yet it didn't, and yet it didn't. Next morning, all around the world, people get up, and it's still here, but everybody hadn't prepared for the next morning.
Oh, and I'm showing everybody your website right now with the page about
I can see it, and I see
apocalypse on it. And it looks like they were predicting in this anthology that we were all going to have life on Earth end this coming July 2015.
I know, but it's, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. So Misha had the concept. He brought together people. He's a very active blogger, and he brought together people from his blog. And we put together this anthology together. And my story, Vodka and Watermelons, I've also just recently published in a little book called Will There Be Watermelons on Mars? Is based in Israel. And every story in the book is based in different places around the world. And that was my first experience of doing a collaborative anthology where we all worked together, we edited together, we put it out together. Since then, I've done a number of anthologies, and each one is slightly different. Some of them are for charity, like Darkly Never After or Shades of Fear. Some of them and then my most recent anthology, Sins of the Past, which I actually have a copy here. Ooh.
Well, wait, you can't show it right now because I'm showing everyone your website. And I just showed the cover of that, and I'm scrolling through.
See, all the other ones, some of them, like Darkly Never After that you show there, are for charity. Some of them were put together by a Facebook group called Fiction Writers, including the heroes and villains you just saw. The Winter Wishes, which are showing up now, that was put together by another really cool Facebook group called Dragon's Rocket Ship that we might talk about a little bit later. So every one of them is slightly different, and every one of them allows me to experiment in different genres, and other than the one that I normally write in, which is YA fantasy. So that's the thing about an anthology. Anthology allows you to experiment. So there you go. I saw you showed them all, and they're all from different places, and some of them go to charity, and some of them go to other people. So there. That's
great. I'm really excited that you've had that opportunity to branch out, I guess you would say, in all the different ways of writing and all the different styles and purposes. And short stories in and of itself are something I'm not really that familiar with as a writer, but I've certainly read a lot of them and appreciate the modality of having to write that tightly and having to really keep yourself not just to a word count, but to a format that lends itself to having a beginning, middle, and end in such a short amount of time, I guess you would call it, in terms of the reader. So it was something I really want to look into more as a writer. And you didn't start out writing short stories, though, did you?
No. Well, I started out as a child writing all different stories in notebooks and things. I've written pretty much all my life since I was, I don't know, since I could write. But I never took myself seriously as a writer until it's October of 2012, was it? Yeah, 2012. I had the flash of a young girl being given a silver cat charm by her grandmother, and I realized that this was really important. And there's a story to tell, and the story came to me over days, and I started talking about it with my daughter. And she said, "Mom, you have to write this." And I'm like, "Write this? Oh, I don't know. I don't, she's the writer. I'm not the writer." And but I'd heard of NaNoWriMo, which National Novel Writing Month of November, and I thought, you know what, maybe I'll try. So I sat down in November of 2012 and I wrote P.A.W.S. But I wrote the first draft of P.A.W.S.
And when you say pause, you're spelling that P period, A period, W period, S period.
Okay, but it didn't start that way.
Okay.
It didn't start that way, and I don't pronounce it that way. P.A.W.S. is, as you say, does have the periods, but it didn't start off that way. It is the name. It kind of evolved as I was writing the story. I realized I was going to have a magical organization of shapeshifters. The book had just been P.A.W.S. without the periods. But I thought, you know what? That could stand for something. So I started thinking about it. And P.A.W.S. actually, I established, stands for the Partnership of Animagi, Werewolves, and Shapeshifters. But it's funny because I had the title before I had the name of the thing. And then we added the dots later. My publisher added the dots, which is kind of interesting.
Okay, well, right now I'm showing up on the screen that people can see your Pause for Thought is the name of your website, and it's DebbieManberKupfer.wordpress.com. Mm-hmm. And also you have Pause for Puzzles, and you also have other pages that have the word pause without the periods. But then some of your things do have the periods, so I understand now how that works.
Mm-hmm. P.A.W.S. with the periods is my YA fantasy series. P.A.W.S. without the periods is me. I am P.A.W.S. I am P.A.W.S. in the National Puzzler League. National Puzzler League is an exclusive group of people who, and it really is a small group of people who are really, really intensely into puzzles. And they get together every year, except I've never managed to make it to one of their conferences. I really want to. And they do stuff that's all puzzly all weekend. We also have a magazine called the Enigma that comes each month. But all the puzzle people have what they call the puzzle nom, N-O-M spelt. And that's how we identify each other. And it's usually by something we like. So I became P.A.W.S. as my puzzle nom in the National Puzzle League years, many, many years before I wrote P.A.W.S., before we got anything with dots. So that P.A.W.S. is me. And P.A.W.S. is me merely for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I really love cats, and I've always really loved cats, and my father really loved cats, and that's a big part of my life. But also because I've always been fascinated by the idea of the animagus in J.K. Rowling's third Harry Potter book, The Prisoner of Azkaban. And here's a little thing, is like I fantasized when I was reading that about going to Hogwarts together with Sirius and James and Remus back when they went to Hogwarts, but thought that if I were like them and I became an animagus, I would be a cat, and my name as a cat would be P.A.W.S. Just like
you're using the term animagus, A-N-I-M-A-G-U-S. Do you want to tell people what you mean by that?
Okay, it's probably anybody that's familiar with that Harry Potter will know what it means, but otherwise, how I mean it in my books and how generally that means is it's a magician in my books, or a witch or wizard in Harry Potter that learns to change themselves into some kind of animal. Okay, that's different in P.A.W.S. I have shapeshifters, anime guy, plural, and werewolves. Now, a werewolf has no choice. They were bitten, or maybe maybe they were born. I also have werewolves who can be born werewolves in my world, okay? But they don't have a choice. It's what they are. A shapeshifter in my world is like Miri, my main character. Her magic comes through a charm, kind of like the one I'm wearing.
Hold it up a little higher because we can't see it there. And just hold it still so we can see it. Okay.
It comes through a charm. Miri wears a charm like this, and it's a charm that's passed on through the generations. And from mother to daughter, through the girl line. And then in her particular case, her father also had a charm that was supposed to be passed. Her grandfather had a charm. In her case, you see, it skipped a generation. She gets her charm from her grandmother, and her grandfather also had a charm. There's a big, too much plot. I'm going to give away too much plot if I go too far into it. But shapeshifters are rare in my world, and they all have silver charms made of argentum, which is the Latin for silver. And that's how they get their magic. The essence of the animal they are is inside the charm. In Miri's case, it's a cat. But I have other characters whose animagus is shapeshifter is other things based on what their charm is. I have, for example, a couple of shapeshifter horses in my book, Sandy and Sean Ryder, and they change into horses, and their silver charms that they got from their parents are also a little silver horses and horseshoes. So it depends. So that's my creation.
So my head is exploding now because in a lot of the fantasy books that I read, silver is really a terrible kind of kryptonite for vampires or even some other kinds of shapeshifters or witches or wizards, depending on who's writing the book and what they decide. But you seem to have the opposite, which is that it becomes something they can focus their talent through, the way that a lot of writers use a crystal. Yes?
Yes, exactly. Silver is the essence. That's my second book is called Argentum. And silver is the essence of all magic in my world. Because it's not just the shapeshifter's charms that are silver, but also the silver scrying bowls that the magicians use, and all the wands and scepters and various things that they use. You can use as magic. In fact, I have one of my characters in my book who just uses a silver fork from the dining room to do his magic because he's showing off. Because he's that kind of person. So anything with silver, they can use for magic in my world. It's the essence of it all. So yes, it's true. In some worlds, silver is bad for certain magical creatures, not in mine. It's one of the things
I like to bring up with people, and you and I were chatting before we started, is the way that we were first inspired as adults to decide to write for publication, to share what we've written. What is it that changed in our lives, or what inspires us, who our influences are. And you mentioned your father, you mentioned Israel, you mentioned Vienna, Austria, you mentioned the Holocaust, you mentioned your own health. So what would you like to share today in this interview conversation with changes that would help people understand you as a writer?
Okay. Well, as I started saying before, I have written stories all my life. But I never wanted to show them to anybody. I was always very private. I was scared my stuff wasn't any good and it was just for me. And I wrote diaries when I was younger that I tore up and threw away because I never wanted anybody to see them. But 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, with breast cancer. And I went through chemo, I went through surgery, I went through radiation, and today I'm very thankful that I'm cancer-free. But it got me thinking. I'd always wanted to write, and I'd been jealous of my few friends I knew, people I knew who had written books and been published. I've always wanted to do that, but I also thought, well, I'm young still, I've got kids at home, I can wait till they've left the house till I'm sort of retired and older, then I'll write. But then going through cancer, I realized, you know what? we're mortal. We don't necessarily have all the years that we have, that we think we have. So when I started, I had the idea for P.A.W.S, I wrote P.A.W.S, but I didn't really know what to do with P.A.W.S. I was writing it for myself. I wanted to finish a book. I didn't really think, will this be published, not published, whatever. I wasn't even thinking about that. But I had to do something with it. And I had to get over this barrier of not being able to show my stuff to other people. So I took the prologue of my book over to a writers group that was just across the street from me, at the All on the Same Page bookstore, which sadly has closed down since. And they had a writing group once a month, and they were really nice people. And I sat there nervously with my paper in my hand. When it came to my turn, I read my prologue. And at the end of it, everybody was staring at me. And I said, "What, is it really that bad?" You know, kind of nervous. They said, you have to get that published. And I'm like, published, really? But they encouraged me. And at that meeting, I also met Robin Tidvetwell of Rocking Horse Publishing. And later I was discovered that between themselves, they'd already been talking about me and telling her that, you know, she needs to publish me. But I didn't. It took several months of going through the ringer of editing and back and forth and trying desperately to write query letters to agents that I found I was really bad at, to finally contact Robin and say, "Well, Robin, what would it take if I wanted to just try and send this to you at Rocking Horse?" And so I did, and she read it and loved it and all the rest of it. And the rest, as we say, is history. So that's how I got published.
So Rocking Horse is the publication,
is the publisher
for all of your fiction. Now, what about your puzzle books?
Okay, so yeah, that's my publisher just for P.A.W.S and Argentum, and will be for others in the series. My puzzle book, puzzle book, which I have over here. I have to show this, but I'm proud of this. Okay, see this?
Pause for Logic with the number 4 as a numeral.
That's
and
right.
It's all one word. Pause for Logic by Debbie Manber Kupfer, and with Joey Kupfer. So tell us about Joey Kupfer. Now, is that your cat? No, that's your child. Yes.
Yes, indeed. As I said, Pause for Logic is my first venture into self-publishing. Up until now, I've been published either with Rocking Horse or in anthologies where I wasn't the publisher. I was just working with other people. But this is all me. Now, it has a history. I write puzzles for magazines. I write puzzles for magazines mainly published by P.A.W.S, who I used to work for as an editor when I lived in New York, and for Dell magazines.
So wait. Dell magazine publishes puzzle books. Those are the ones like you go to the airport into the little bookstores, and there's like a whole row of puzzle books. Those are the Dell puzzle books you're talking about?
Dell or P.A.W.S. Yeah, here's a P.A.W.S.
Look at those.
Hold it back a little bit. If you look inside,
Debbie, hold it up again, but hold it back toward you. There, now we can see it. Okay, interesting.
If you look inside one of these, you won't be able to see it catch up, but you go inside and you find like a contributor list. You will find my name on pretty much any contributor list on any of these magazines in the grocery store. This is what I do. This is what I do. I write puzzles for magazines. Ladies
and gentlemen, we have a puzzle celebrity here. Clear the way. We want autographs.
Okay. Well, but now here's how Pause for Logic came about. Up until about a year ago, my logic puzzles were all published in one Dell publisher book called Dell Logic Puzzles. Sadly, about a year ago, they had to make You know, it might even be longer than a year ago. It might be closer to 2 years now. I don't know. But they had to make an editorial decision that they were no longer going to accept new copy from constructors because they couldn't afford to pay for new copies. So then, even though the magazine still comes out and it still has my name on a lot of the puzzles, they're all reprints now, most of them from years ago.
Oh.
So when that happened, they sent me back a big pack of puzzles, logic problems that they'd previously accepted and test solved and said were all fine, but now they weren't going to be able to publish. So I sat there with this big pack of puzzles thinking, well, what am I going to do with them? And I tried with a couple of other publishers too. I had it 2 different times. I was negotiating with other people to publish a puzzle book for me with these puzzles in them. But it wasn't going anywhere. People didn't say no, but they said we weren't quite ready yet. Wait. And I got antsy and I decided, you know what? So many of my friends, so many of my author friends self-publish on CreateSpace. I can do this too. So I took the puzzles I had from that set, I added some more, and I made Pause for Logic.
All right, so now I'm going to ask you, can you pick out a puzzle and can you read it or share it with us? And let's you and I just talk through it, how you created it, what's involved. How would I go about solving it if I were using this book?
Sure.
What's the whole deal? Can you pick one out that's not super hard? Because we don't have a lot of time.
Well, let's do the first. I do have, before we even start, I do have a how to solve logic problems page in the book here. I don't know if you guys can see this.
It gives you the example of how to make a chart and how to use the chart and everything.
Yeah.
Good.
The charts are usually there is a whole. This is how you solve a logic problem. So you can work through this puzzle here if you bought the book, and it will explain it all. When I was a kid, I was really, the first time I bought a logic book, a book of logic problems, I thought I was entering like a magic world. I loved it so much, and I sat there and I did, solved my whole book. And I must have been younger than Joey. I was probably 8 or 9 when I first got my first book. And lo and behold, the same thing happened to Joey, except he got one step further. He decided not only did he want to solve puzzles, he wanted to write them himself.
Because mommy writes them, so he could write them.
Right, so he can write them too. So if you go in this book,
just read us how it starts. Read us one puzzle.
Okay, because I wanted to just show you the table of contents because this is kind of neat.
Well, we really can't see it though.
But if you were to be looking at the table of contents, you will discover that there are 6 puzzles out of the 37 that were written by Joey. I give him credit for every single one.
And how old is he when he wrote them?
It varied. A few of the puzzles he is 12 now. So a few of the puzzles he wrote a couple of years ago and were part of that original set that was sent back to me, because he used to write them, when I was writing before, and I would edit them for him and then I would submit them. So a couple are there, and a couple are new ones that he wrote specifically for this book. So maybe we'll use one of his, which he wrote for this book, an early one, to talk about, because you wanted me to do it. So we can use.
Good.
This is the number 2 in the book. It's called Spelling Test. And it's not the kind of spelling you would think of with spelling. This is about some apprentice witches. We have Fern and Xandra and 3 other young apprentice witches are studying for their final spelling test. Each is having difficulty mastering a particular spell. One is having a problem with flotaneous and is getting help from their mentor. Can you determine the name of each apprentice and mentor and the spell each is trying to master?
Okay, so I'm going to stop you here. So this is what I would call a 3-way logic puzzle. What do you call it?
I call it a logic problem.
Okay, but it has 3 components rather than 2 or 4. It has the witches, it has the spells, and it has the mentors.
Yes,
right?
That's correct. That is correct. And
okay, I'm with you. I'm with you so far. Okay, what else does it say?
Okay, so now I have the clues. Joey Joey wrote this puzzle, and Joey put 7 clues for this puzzle. It's a small puzzle, but it's still required that. So the first clue says that according to the tradition among witches, mentors and apprentices have different initials. Also, no witch is either teaching or practicing a spell that starts with the same letter as her name. So if you go through, you'll decide that the names of the apprentices are Demonica, Fern, Lucinda, Willow, and Exandria. And their mentors are Delilah, Florence, Lauren, Loxana, Wisteria, and Xena. So therefore, you know automatically, you can put a row of X's that none of them, when they start with the same letter, they can't be thing. And the same with the spells. The spells have letters. Dougalus, Flotanius, Lavalotius, Widdershinius, and X marks Despotius, my favorite, that one. And they all...
The main purpose of that kind of information is to eliminate possibilities or to make some that are unique possibilities, right?
Exactly. So then we go on to the next one. We say that Xena, who begins with an X, is teaching either Lavalotius, which is a powerful aphrodisiac spell, or Widdershinius, a spell that makes everything go backwards. Part of the fun of this is coming up with the spells, which I did together with Joey, and making them fun, what they do. My apps have said...
I love the names. That is the fake Latin names. They're very funny.
Right. Fake Latin names. It's great. So we know then that Xena, narrowed it down a lot, because now we know that Xenia can really only have 2 spells. So that helps you. You can X out everything else. We already know she can't have X mark Despotius. So therefore, there's only 2 left. There's only 5 options, and she only has 2 options left to think. So
as you go through this and you read all 7 clues, by the time you get to the 7th clue, you have all the information you need, but you still have to do some thinking and checking and Xing out, and then you'll start to see where things have to go.
That's correct. And if you get lost, at the back of my book, I do have detailed solutions that explain all the steps. So you get lost on one, you're not quite sure where you're going. You want to just check your answers, or you want to see where did I go wrong here. You can read the solutions.
But you don't have a page of hints or clues or anything.
I don't give hints and clues, but I do, as I say, detailed solutions. There's too much to do that. Not all of the puzzles. This is a grid puzzle. It has, it has a normal puzzle grid. I don't think.
No, hold it back. We can see it better if you hold there. Okay, good.
Okay, so it has a normal grid. I don't do a lot of grid puzzles in this book. I tend to enjoy doing puzzles that have special kinds of charts and things. So let's see, for example.
The problem is you have a lot of light to your right. So if you hold it more to the left, we'll see it better.
Okay. This is my left? Oh, this is my left.
Well, your left is the one that's near your left arm.
Okay. My left arm. Oh, that'll be this way.
Yeah, there's less light of a glare over there, but it's still, you know what, it's just not a good venue to see pages.
But I was going to say that some of the puzzles, if you go online, although it's more useful to have this book as a paperback, it is up on Kindle too. So you do have, you can do a preview and look at some of the early puzzles and test them. I say in this book, I have a code in there that people can come to my website, and everybody who buys a book, either as paperback or as a Kindle copy, can come to the website and pick up a code to get a free PDF so that they can print out their own grids as many times as they wish to help them along.
Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice. And I want to welcome 3 people that have been watching for a while. We have Yolanda Sykes, we have Ron Snaberger, and we have Vivekananda Bendor Rao. Thanks for coming today. And comment or question anything you'd like, write it right in there and we'll see you. Debbie's been explaining her logic puzzles that she co-wrote with her son, Joey. And we also talked earlier about your fiction. And I think you were going to tell us a little bit more after you found out you had cancer, how that inspired you to write the books you'd been thinking about. And then you started to contribute to anthologies after that. So was there something else you wanted to tell us about, some upcoming release parties or events or conferences that you're attending, things like that?
Okay. Well, what's going on? This Friday. This is not. I don't have to do anything for this, but it's kind of cool. I'm my story Griddlebone from Sins of the Past anthology is going to be featured on horroraddicts.net. It's a podcast, and I'm their Friday free fiction. They have a Friday free fiction for horror, and it's all things horror, because this is the horror anthology. So that's the nearest thing that's going on. I'm also currently participating in 2 April events online. I am writing my 3rd book of the P.A.W.S series as part of Camp NaNoWriMo, the April one, and I find Camp and Nano so useful to my writing. It helps me focus every morning. This is the first morning of the whole of April that I haven't gotten up and just written until I got my 1,000 words before I turn on the internet. This is the only first morning I haven't done that. Every other morning in April, that's what I do. I sit down, write my words, then I allow myself to go and play. Also this April, for the 2nd time on my blog, on my puzzle blog, I'm participating in blogging from A to Z, and I'm posting a puzzle every day this month, and people can come to my puzzle blog, and it's been a lot of fun. People post comments or, ask for hints from the puzzles. I'm always happy to interact with people, and I've got some nice things coming up for the rest of the month if people want to come by.
Spell out the name of your puzzle blog again, the way to get to it.
It's P.A.W.S 4 puzzles with a 4 in the middle.
And that's .com, right?
That's .wordpress.com.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I'm putting that on the event page for people who want to go to the Google Plus event page and see this later. Okay. That's where this information about your podcast on Friday will be, and where your URLs are. And I think I might have spelled horror addicts wrong, so I'm going to go fix that. I think I didn't give it enough D's. But go ahead and tell us some more things that are coming up for you.
All right. So at the end of May, I'm traveling. I'm going to England and Israel. I haven't actually traveled out of the country for 2 years, and my mother lives in Israel, so I really need to do this. But it happens to coincide with a reunion that one of my friends has put together for my senior school, or you call them high schools here, Eastbury. So I'm going to my school reunion in the very end of May, and then while I'm in England, I'm also going to be going back to my old school, Eastbury, and talking to the children at the school about my writing and what I did. And I'm in negotiations with the librarian at the moment to set that all up and all my dates and things. But I'm really excited about that. That
is very cool. I think that those kids are going to be delighted to have you. And we have a comment here from Vivekananda. He says, "I may be wrong here, but logic alone would make one's life miserable, in my opinion. What do you people say to that? We need creativity, which breaks logic and very often goes against logic." And he's asking both of us to speak to his comment here. So I'm going to hand that over to you, Debbie. I think he's a little tongue-in-cheek. Vivekananda is very funny. But I think he's partly serious, too. Like, what would you say to that?
Oh, of course. I mean, obviously, I write fantasy, so but even within my fantasy, I like my world to be logical. Because it bothers me if I'm reading somebody's book, some fantasy or science fiction, and the magic doesn't make sense, or the science doesn't make sense. It does bother me. So even in my fantasy, I like there to be a logical. I like to be able to explain it, and I can explain every little minutiae of the magic in my world, like how it's supposed to work. I don't necessarily have to write it all out, but if someone asks me, I can explain it. And so even though, it's nice. I obviously dreaming, imagination, all that is good, but I think, you know, in writing, we also have to be logical, and I can get lost by people who seem to be all over the place and not, you know, in their magic world and don't really understand what they're doing here. You're doing here too.
So what we talk about in speculative fiction is world building, and the people who will be critiquing our books are very often going to look at it from that point of view and say, you know, how logical, how plausible, how, if you're writing science fiction, how scientifically accurate, or if you're writing fantasy, how consistent is the world that you've built. And I think readers get irate when the person writing the book, or especially if it's a series, is inconsistent or irrational in the way they've built their world. And they will not forgive you if you start out building the world a certain way, and then in a future volume, you do something that doesn't make sense with it. They're going to rat you out. They're going to be like, no, you don't get to do that. You know, if you're saying that Vulcans are not emotional, you can't have them crying at a funeral, you know, things like that. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're on the same page. Exactly my feeling too.
And I think world building is a skill, but it's also an art, because if everything were purely logical, then I think Vivekananda's point is true. It would be a little bit dull or a little bit boring. I'm not sure it would make us miserable, but it wouldn't be fun. And so you do need the creativity that brings in the spark, right?
Correct, exactly. I mean, I imagine so much stuff. It's interesting. I met with, maybe I can talk about her book too. I didn't even think about this. I met with another local author on Monday. Was it Monday? Yes, Rosalind. Now, Rosalind is 80 years old, and she was fortunate to meet a Holocaust survivor, and she's written his story as a children's book, as a picture book. I'm helping her get it published. But she turned to me and said, "But I couldn't write like you. I couldn't write fantasy. I'm only being able to write this because it's a real story that's been told to me, you know?" So it's interesting how some people feel that this spark, this imagination is just not, you know.
Well, Vivekananda comes back with this comment. He says, logic has been what has been earning a living for him. He says, I've been a software developer. And then he puts in, but any new development in software also needs creativity, which is often illogical. So he basically agrees with you that we need both.
Can I, is it possible to ask Vivek? I have a question for, I can't pronounce his name. I'm sad about that.
Vivekananda. He's from an Indian-speaking part of the world. I'm not sure he's actually from India himself, but that's a Hindu term, Vivekananda. So
I have a lot of Indian friends. Is this something we never thought we were going to talk about, but I want to bring this up now. I'm also an admin for one of a really huge group on Facebook called the Cryptic Crossword Society. And it strikes me that maybe V, I'm going to call him V because I still can't pronounce the name, might actually be part of our group or be interested in our group. I wondered if he is interested in cryptic crosswords, because it seems like a logical mind. We have a lot of Indians. We have a lot of Indian members. Maybe the group is maybe 75% Indian, I would say.
Well, I think software developers are well known for liking to solve and break codes and create codes, and certainly cryptic crosswords would fall into that category. I can't speak for this particular individual. Vivekananda, if you want to write a comment or answer, or go visit Debbie on her website, or go visit the group on Facebook. Vivekananda is a Google Plus person, by the way. I don't know if he's even on Facebook. I know him through Google Plus and through Hangouts and through other areas that Google runs. And some Google Pluses are purists, and they don't venture into Facebook territory. I don't know. Maybe Vivekananda would go, you know.
It's a very, very vibrant group. We have people who've created IDs just for our group and don't do Facebook outside of the Cryptic Crossword Society. We set clues for each other all day long. There's, you know, because we have people from all over the world, there's always something on there. It's like you can never come and say, oh, well, I've read all the clues now. There's always something new. And some of these people have become kind of good friends of mine too. I didn't start off, I started off with this group. It wasn't my group. It was a guy from Scotland started the group originally, who's no longer one of the admins. And there were only 400 of us when I first joined. And now we have like 10,000, 12,000. I haven't looked last time, but we always get more and more people join.
That's a big group.
It's a very big group and a very active group. And
you said you're part of a few other groups you wanted to give a shout out to today. What that you are participating in on Facebook? Yes.
Okay, I probably need to give a shout out to two groups. Firstly, one of the groups that published a couple of the anthologies I was part with. This is Fiction Writers Group. It's another really big group on Facebook. For you authors out there, join, but be warned. They have a very, very tough no self-promo policy. So don't, you promo, you're out. So it's only for discussion of all things authorly, and they do publish their own anthologies. There's a call for submissions at the moment for a horror-based anthology, which they're doing. So I'm in two of their anthologies. That's Heroes and Villains and Flash It.
But you haven't given us the name of this group.
I did, the Fiction Writers Group.
The Fiction Writers Group. That's the actual name of it.
The name of
the Fiction Writers Group. And Vivekananda did come back and say, yes, he would like to know the name of your group that you mentioned. Is it called the Cryptic Crosswords Group, Debbie?
It's called the Cryptic Crossword Society.
Oh, Cryptic Crossword Society. CRYPTIC, Cryptic Crossword Society. For you, Vivekananda, and anyone else who might be interested in such puzzles, go to that Facebook group. He says he does use Facebook a little bit, mostly for personal and family stuff, but he might venture over there for the 10,000 strong Cryptic Crossword Society. And what was the other group you wanted to mention?
Okay, so I was first going to just show you one of the books from Fiction Writers before we go on to the other group. This is their most recent anthology. I have my story in this book is called Alistair, and it's about my villain in P.A.W.S. So anybody who's read P.A.W.S. and wants to know more about what made him so evil, read this. Get a copy of this and read Alistair. And the
cover of that is on your website, and links to it are on your website and on the event page.
Correct.
Good. Okay. Go ahead. So then, what's the other group you wanted to mention?
The other group, and I'm going to bring their anthology out here, is my absolute favorite group on Facebook. It's called the Dragon's Rocket Ship. It is a group for all things geeky. It's not just for writers, it's for artists, so for people who just happen to like geeky stuff, right? Anything to do with science fiction, fantasy, anime, drawing, cosplay, whatever you like. You'll find people who it's a no drama group. Everybody's really sweet and really nice in there, and they're not as strict as fiction.
Okay.
As I said.
Dragon's Rocket Ship on Facebook. Now, you won't believe it, but we are past a quarter of the hour.
Oh, wow.
So I have to stop us from our discussion for a minute and ask you if there's one more thing you wanted to finish up before we go to my big question.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just wanted to show their anthology, which is a charity anthology that I have a little story into. This is Winter Wishes. All goes to Make-A-Wish charity, and this is suitable for kids too. This is an anthology. My story in here is a children's story, and there's lots of little, but this is suitable for all ages. So
people who don't know, the Make-A-Wish Foundation is for kids with cancer and other terminal diseases, and it gives them a chance to have one wish fulfilled by the Make-A-Wish good fairies, as much as that's possible. Mm-hmm. And they're asking people to contribute to it. And if you buy this anthology, you not only get to give a donation, but you get to have some great stories.
Right. I just wanted to do
all right.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you my big question that I always ask. And yes, Vivekananda, we will put the links to those groups in the event page, okay? He's asking for that.
Okay.
So what I'm going to ask you is what I always ask my guests, changes this Conversations Between Authors show, which is given all the local, personal, regional, state, national, political, social, spiritual, climactic, and environmental, and any other kinds of changes you're aware of. Which ones arouse in you hope, which ones arouse in you fear, and which ones would you like to speak about today in the 8 or 10 minutes we have left on our little show here. Take it away, Debbie Manber Kupfer.
Okay. I think this is the time to talk about my most recent publication, which is a little ebook called Will There Be Watermelons on Mars? Because the stories in there, particularly the second story in there, could well be controversial. It's a story, it's called Chalutzim, which means pioneers in Israel. And it's a story I wrote originally for an anthology that was supposed to be all about the colonization of Mars. But for various personal reasons, I decided to withdraw the story from the anthology and publish it myself. It's a story, when I lived in Israel, and I lived in Israel for 8 years, I spent 1 year living in the Arab village of Tira as part of a project called Interns for Peace. It was a very hopeful time. It was the Rabin years before he was assassinated, and everybody thought that the peace would come. Peace was going to come. It was on the opposite. We were going to have the Palestinian state, the peace, and everything. And then, of course, as everybody knows, it didn't come. My story is a personal story, and it's a young Jew and a young modern Orthodox Jew called Reuven meets a young Israeli Arab girl called Neymar while they're in college together, and they fall in love. But no one wants to give them a chance because, that's not the world. It's hard. When I lived in Tira, there were actually a couple of mixed families in Tira, all on the outskirts, accepted in Tira, but not really accepted in the world outside of Tira, okay? So I have this girl, she comes from Tira in the story. She's actually featured in the story before when she's younger as well. The whole thing kind of goes with the watermelons are the central theme that you can work it out yourself if you read the book. It's only 99 cents on Amazon at the moment. But anyway, after years of trying to live in Tel Aviv and then live in Tira, Reuven is approached in the factory he works by some recruiters from the Technion who are recruiting people to go colonize Mars. And they think of Mars as being their hope, the hope to start again. There's a line in the story when Neymar is thinking, like, in the future, like maybe if people ask what she is Arab or a Jew or Muslim or whatever, maybe she'll say, no, I'm not any of that, I'm a Martian. That wants to make the complete new start, a world where they can, where people, and that was my idea for, I don't know what the whole Mars anthology, this is not going to be part of anymore, is going to have, but I would hope it's an anthology of hope, that people would come, not care about, the differences, whether it between black and white or Arab and Jew or gay, straight, whatever. So that people would come together and have a fresh start on and pull away all the prejudices, because you're working together as chalutzim, as pioneers in a new place. So that's
it's very utopian, and a lot of science fiction and fantasy are not. So I appreciate that a lot. I really write that way myself.
Okay, so that's actually why I remember last night I offered to send you a copy, because I thought you might like this, because it's very short. It's just as I said, it's just and it's cool because my little book of just 6,000 words total is not only going to be, is already on as an ebook, but it's actually going to be an audio book, and it's going to be translated in Spanish within like a couple of months, because I put them up on ACX and BabelCube, and people like translating and audio narrating short books because it's less, so I'm kind of excited.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, you're getting a shout out here from one of our viewers today, Yolanda Sykes, who says that she really enjoys you and she thinks you're very interesting and very insightful. She liked our conversation. She loves your personal story, and she's really glad to have been invited and wanted to give you her blessings. Thank you, Yolanda, for coming.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who's listening here.
Yeah, it's really been an incredible journey. We're almost at the end of our hour, and I want to remind everybody where they can reach you, which is on wordpress.com, and you spell out your entire name, right?
Yes, I do. That's my author site, and then my puzzle site is the pauseforpuzzles.word.
And people can find all that on the event page on Google+. And I also want to remind people that you are having a new release come out with this Are There Watermelons on Mars, right?
It's Will There Be Watermelons on Mars is a new release. It's out now. It's already out now. It's on Amazon. I'm the only one with the book that called that, so it's very easy to find.
Just put in the word watermelons and the word Mars, and it'll pop right up, right? That's a good way to title your book.
I kind of like the title. It kind of fits together. As I say, the first story in the book is the one from P.A.W.S, and then the last story in the book is the one I just talked about, is Chalutzim. So I hope you.
Debbie, I think you made a new friend with Wiwekananda. He says that's how you're supposed to pronounce his name. I wasn't saying it correctly. Wiwekananda says he lives in England. And he says, when you come to England, maybe you can meet in real life, which we say IRL, Wiwekananda. So anyway, yeah, so that's kind of fun. You two should get hooked up through your website.
Friend me on Facebook, because that's where I mostly am.
Friend her on Facebook. Anyone who wants to connect, and you can do private messaging that way. Good idea. And then I also want to give a notice to everybody that our next guest, coincidentally, I did not plan this way, is another St. Louisan, a very prolific author in the science fiction field. Mark Tiedemann is going to be my guest next week on April 22nd for the next episode 28 of Changes, Conversations Between Authors, 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern Time in the United States. And I'm excited to have him on. He's hugely prolific and has a great reputation as a novelist and a short story writer. And I also want to remind people that I will not be having a show on April 29th. I always take 1 week off. And this month I happened to take 2 off because someone got sick. And I postponed Rob Slater to later. He's coming back in July. So I want to thank you, Debbie, for being on the show today. You've been fantastic. And are there some other shout outs and thank yous you'd like to make?
Well, I want to thank you mainly, Sally, for inviting me on. It was really reaching out to me through Goodreads, which that's maybe the one connection I've ever made this way. So yes, thank you.
Well, I think it was interesting. There was some kind of a thing where they asked people where they were from. Yeah. And we both happened to say that we were from St. Louis. And then we actually met in real life the first time. Just a few minutes away, we lived from each other. And this is a big county here, but we happened to live within 5 minutes of each other. And we met right nearby at a bagel place and had a great talk. And you said you'd come on my show. So thank you so much. I appreciate that. Now, is there anybody else you want to thank or shout out to before we close today?
Just tell people come join the Dragon's rocket ship. Shout out to all my friends there, because they're a really cool group.
Now, I know you and Joey had a puzzle event a couple months ago here in St. Louis at a bookstore. Are you going to be doing anything like that in the spring or summer?
I'm not anything planned. In the summer, maybe. I might be at Writers in the Park in the summer in Kirkwood. So, yes, I have to talk to Brad about that. But, yes, I might do something like that there.
Okay. And then I want to remind people that if you like these video casts, you might also like a podcast. And I'm trying to turn these into podcasts, but that takes a little funding because you have to have a host site for your podcast. So I am on patreon.com trying to do some crowdfunding, patreon.com/Sally Ember. And I actually did a video about why I need some help with funding. And I sing on one of those videos, not very well. But if you'd like to see that, that's all on patreon.com. And the links are also on my website, which is the best way to reach me, sallyember.com. SALLYEMBER.com. And Wiwekananda is asking about next week's science fiction author. I will definitely send you an invite. And thank you for coming today, Yolanda Sykes and Ron Snaberger and Wiwekananda and anybody else that came. That if I didn't see your name because you were over on YouTube or you're watching later on Replay City, please leave comments. Please ping Debbie Kupfer is the way you can ping her on Google. Kupfer, that's the way she uses her name on Google+. And on Google+, I am Sally Sue Ember. So that's how you ping me. And we'd love to know that you came and you saw and you conquered. So visit us and make comments on our web pages or on the event page or the YouTube page of this video. Watch other changes videos. And as Debbie did during our talk, and as all of you can, please recommend other authors as guests. I have openings starting in June, and it's almost every Wednesday. Thank you again, Debbie. Do you want to say a last goodbye?
Bye. Bye, everybody.
And I'll say bye to everybody, too. And as I say every week, go well with your changes.